What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Facts on the Ground. I'm Misty Winston, joined by my co-host Jesse Zerwell. Today we have a very special guest, somebody that I actually met at the March for Medicare for All in Columbus, Ohio. He's actually running for the 3rd Congressional District in Ohio, going up one of the Democratic Party's most favorite people. Definitely somebody you want to keep your eye on. So Matthew Meade, thank you very much for joining the show today.
Thank you so very much for having me. I'm super excited. I was telling you earlier, I am still at work. I'm in a closet at work. So we're just kind of doing this on right after I got off, and I work at a restaurant. So it's very much like on the fly. You do what you got to do. And then sometimes you don't get off when you're supposed to, but here we are.
Yes, I'm a restaurant person too. My husband actually works in a restaurant, so I totally understand. There's no need to apologize.
Oh, no apology needed because someone's
Yeah.
got to do it.
Yes, somebody does have to do it. And I actually love the restaurant business for all its faults. It's a lot of fun. I have severe ADHD, and I feel like the controlled chaos is very good for my brain. So, I love kind of the whole restaurant vibe.
And your background adds some industrial vibes to our show.
I am literally
which we've
in a
been
closet.
sorely lacking. So
truly working class.
In a closet.
Yeah, truly
It's
working
good
class.
thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely working class. I studied theater, so I have by definition worked in a restaurant my entire career. And it has been the easiest thing. I was telling Jesse asked me earlier, what have you noticed during the pandemic or after the pandemic in the restaurant business? And I said, for working in this industry since I was 18, 19, right now keeping staff is the hardest, but I've seen it's just a turnaround that's really crazy. So we're going with it.
Yeah, my husband deals with the same thing. Trying to keep everything staffed is really difficult. So
yeah, and I'm the person who does the schedule, so it's even worse for me.
Yeah, that's pretty difficult. Yeah. So we met at the March for Medicare for All, which was fun. Chris invited you to come and be a speaker, and you did an amazing job. So how did you come to meet Chris? How did you just curiously, because I love Chris and he was great. Like, I had a great working experience with him organizing for the march. So yeah, how did you get involved?
Yeah, so I'm going to backtrack a little bit. I'm running for Congress in Ohio's 3rd Congressional District. Like you said, I'm running against what I like to call the Democratic Party's golden child here in Ohio, Joyce Beatty. And I'm challenging her from the left, which, as we see in the entire country, is like saying Beetlejuice 3 times. It's almost like taboo. And so me doing that has been very difficult in the sense of getting attention and getting light shed on what I'm doing and what I'm speaking about. So when you see an opportunity, you go for it. And I was on Twitter one day and I saw there was a march for Medicare for All. I, like we've talked about, work in a restaurant, so I don't have health insurance, and Medicare for All is a huge cornerstone of my platform and one major thing I'm running on. So I saw this march and I thought, oh my God, I have to speak at it. So I immediately, from my campaign Twitter, DM'd the March for Medicare for All people and was like, hi, I'm Matthew, I'm running for Congress. I want to speak at this march. And so then hold on one second. They're out there. Still working. Still people coming in. I DM'd them and I said, I want to speak at this march. And they said, okay, we'll relay the message. Well, that took too long for me. So I figured out who the person was and I emailed them, and it happened to be Chris. And I was like, hi, Chris, I'm Matthew. I'm running for Congress. I would like to speak at your march. And I believe that I was like the first person to contact Chris. And that's where we met, was doing that. And from there, I kind of was in the loop on everything that was going on with the march. Was so honored to be surrounded by all of those people and meet such incredible individuals. And had an incredible time. Thank you for the compliment about speaking really well. I can speak really intensely one-on-one, and I can tell a story and get to know somebody really well one-on-one. But speaking in a larger group is something I'm still learning to do. And there's no criteria to be a politician. Everyone has their ups, everyone has their downs, and I think that went very well. I was very proud of myself. So thank you for that compliment. It actually means
yeah, no, you did great. And I hate public speaking too. So
you're very, very, very good at it.
I hate it. I hate it.
Just think of Biden and be thankful that you're not him.
That's true. At least I can, form a coherent sentence. Sometimes, sometimes not. Sometimes I can't. It's
Sometimes
fine.
people don't.
Yeah.
Not everybody can. You can't do everything 100% at all times.
No, like doing shows I've gotten a lot better at. And like you said, one-on-one, I'm great at like having a conversation with 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 people or whatever. But then when you get me in front of like a large group of people, I hate that stuff. I hate it with a fiery passion. So I don't know how I got convinced to actually MC that event.
You were great. My best friend was there with me, and after we left, she said, that MC was so freaking cool. And I was like, yeah, listen to her show.
Yes, listen to my shows.
Yeah, listen to the shows.
Okay, so go ahead, Jesse, because I'm talking a lot. I do that.
That's okay. Matthew, you spoke a little bit about the decision to run for Congress and mentioned that it was a fairly quick decision. Maybe you can expand on that a little more. And also the person you're running against, Meade, how long has she been in office?
Yeah, so with that two-parter, I'm going to quickly answer. Joyce has been in office since the creation of Ohio's 3rd Congressional District, which was in the 2010 census created this district. So she went into office immediately following. So she has been in office the entire time this district has been in existence, and only been challenged one other time, which was in 2020, which opened the progressive door. So thank you. But to answer the other question, I have always known that I wanted to fight for equity and equality on a grand scale, on a national scale, actually. And I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And over the pandemic, I thought, okay, how are you going to do that? So I had something lined up where it was going to probably get me there, I was hoping. And it got canceled due to the pandemic, like so many other things did. And once that got canceled, I thought, okay, I still want to stand on this platform or be in this spot where I'm able to help people from California to South Carolina. And I didn't know how I was going to do that. And I thought, okay, well, if you get to this platform, what are you actually doing? Are you screaming into the wind, change, equality, equity, or are you actually making the change? And once I said that physically to myself, I thought, oh, you want to actually make change. Okay, who's making change? And I thought lawmakers are making change. Now, I did say that I was like, okay, lawmakers are making change, you're going to run for Congress. That's not necessarily true. I decided, okay, lawmakers are making change. What can you run for? What office can you run for? And I thought, okay, let's look. I'm from a small city about 45 miles north of Columbus called Marion, Ohio. And I thought, I'm going to run for mayor. So I started looking around and seeing like what Marion was doing. They have a fully Democratic government, but they were red in the presidential election. So we can decide what that means.
That's very Ohioan.
Very Ohioan, right? And so then I realized that the Equality Act, as we know, has not been passed in the House and the Senate. It's not a law. But there are municipalities within the state that are creating their own anti-discrimination ordinances. At the time, there were 32 different municipalities in the state of Ohio that had created anti-discrimination ordinances that would protect LGBTQIA members on the basis of gender identity and sexual orientation under housing and insurance and all these things that we see that are being discriminated against, like housing, insurance. My brain is blank, but and Marion was not one of them. Marion was not one of those municipalities. So I thought, okay, let's do it. Let's introduce this anti-discrimination ordinance. I introduced it 4 times and realized that my trip to becoming the mayor was going to be very homophobic and very hurtful as a very out gay male. I am the gayest person I know. And so I realized that was not going to work. And then when I made a list of all the things that I believed in, that I wanted other people to experience, it was federal. It was a federal thing. And I thought, okay, United States Congress, I know for a fact that our representative isn't doing anything, is not protecting the 15th largest LGBTQ population in the country is in Columbus, Ohio, and our representative has done nothing to protect those individuals. She called herself the housing queen. Okay, well then why did you go on vacation during before we could re-up the eviction moratorium? So that's I live in Milo Grogan, which is a district, which is a neighborhood east of the Italian Village here in Columbus. There are homes going, my side of the duplex is $147,000 or $174,000, I'm sorry. And there are houses being built for $500,000 and being sold in that opportunity neighborhood. People are getting kicked out of their houses. That is blatant disconnect. There's blatant disconnect from a representative. And I knew that's what I wanted to do. I knew that I am a working class person who lives the life of the people in my district. And I want to make sure that those people are being represented how I have not been. So when I thought that, I was like, okay, let's do it. Let's run for Congress. And I did say earlier, it was about a half an hour after I decided to run for Congress. And it was like, oh, you want to run for Congress, don't you? Okay, let's think about it. Okay, yep, that's it. Let's do it. I
like your style because I'm very impulsive too. So I like that. I make huge decisions like that. Too. Like if you give me like a totally mundane, like, what do you want to have for dinner? It'll take me like an hour to decide. If you give me like a big life choice, I'm like, boom, let's go.
Bam. I love it. Yes. I feel like we're very similar.
Yeah, probably. So yeah, if you, I mean, you watch the show, Jesse and I are not big fans of electoral politics. We don't think that's really, we're not really, we don't, we get into disagreements with Shahid Buttar every time he comes on, and I love him. Okay. But we just, like, for us personally, it just doesn't seem like that's very effective. I mean, just look at what you're going through. You can't even get media coverage. Our elections are rigged. And that's not to like discourage anybody from doing it. Everybody can do their own thing. Just for us personally, it's never made a whole lot of sense. So do you think that you're going to be able to even get, like, I mean, you're obviously already experiencing this. You're not getting a fair shake. You're not getting you can't even get media coverage. And that's why a huge part of the reason why we don't think electoral politics is really going to work, because they're never going to allow somebody who will actually challenge power to make any headway at all. So what do you think about that? Have you considered that? Have you have you grappled with that at all?
Absolutely. Running for any sort of political office is not for the faint of heart, and I have multiple ups and downs emotionally. I would like to say every day, but I probably think every hour. There will be like 1 hour where I'm like, okay, Matt, this is it. This is how you're going to do it. This is what you're going to do. And then there will be like 25 minutes later and I'll look at myself in the mirror and say, how the fuck do you think you're going to do this? Right. And that's hard. That's really hard. And then you have, like what you said, that there's no media coverage. There are all these things, because people always say, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Well, it is broken. People just don't see that it's broken. But then when you prove to them that things that we're doing don't work, then they're like, oh, okay, but this has been so good for so long. And I'm like, no. Like, I could not be able to adopt a child because we don't have a law that says that LGBTQ parents cannot be discriminated against in the adoption agency. I have to be celibate for 3 months to donate blood to save a life. That's not okay. And so you look at the real thing and you think, how can people not do this? And those are things that you look at and you think, well, you have to have a fighter's heart, because I know and have talked with my team and know that no matter what, we're doing this until the end, because we have to make the change that we need to make. Because if not who? If not me right now in this time frame, then who else is going to fight for those things? So you have to have a fighter spirit as well. So that's something that I always keep in mind. Something that I'm kind of emotional about, but like, know that it is okay. I spoke about this at the rally. That was my grandma, my biggest supporter, my favorite human being in the entire world, died in March, 4 days after my birthday. In her home, great, love of my life. But when she called me, she was like, how is the city council election going? I was like, oh, grandma, no. I'm running for like federal United States Congress. She's like, that's pretty big, but if anybody's gonna do it, it's gonna be you. Aww. And that is like the number one thing where I'm like, okay, I'm doing this for better or for worse. And like I said, some days it's for better, some days it's for worse. 2:00 it's for better, 2:03 for worse. So it's it's definitely been a time.
That's definitely something I experienced too with activism. So again, I totally relate, like, especially with Assange stuff. It's, why the hell am I doing this? But, if I didn't have like a little bit of hope in my cold, dead heart, I wouldn't do it. So, I think it's just
Yeah.
it's really just a difference of tactic. Some people think that electoral politics is still able to make change. I'm more of a direct action person. So, and it's not to
Right.
say either
Mutual
person's
aid.
right or wrong. Yeah. Mutual aid, direct action. That's where I used to be. Jesse, I'm talking so much again. I'm so sorry. I'm very
Well,
ranty today.
I was going to say that people often ask us, what's your alternative to electoral politics? And my answer would be working at the local level outside of an official position, working as a communal body within a community, providing mutual aid, fighting for housing, etc., and building movements that way. And it doesn't have to be centralized, it can be decentralized. And obviously there's a lot more that goes into it than that, and there would be a lot more that needs to go into it to implement it, but I think that's a starting point. So that's with my pushback as regards electoral politics. That's my general answer. How do you feel about that? Because you mentioned that you started with a mayoral campaign and now you're running at the federal level. Was there anything at the local level besides the blatant homophobia you were experiencing that convinced you or gave you the impetus to go to the federal level? You explained a little bit of that with.
Yeah. So let me interject for just one quick second about electoral politics, because I think that we can get things done in electoral politics when you elect the people that are correct to be there. People like myself who are working on the ground, but then also are going into those offices. I think there is a nice marrying that can be done there. But on your question about the mayoral campaign, I didn't actually start the mayoral campaign. It was just an idea. But I always, funnily enough, always thought that being the mayor of my hometown would be fun. Like when I was in the 8th grade, I was like, oh, it would be so fun to be the mayor, but not like in a policy thing, more like holding big scissors at an opening. Like that's kind of what I thought. So that was the immediate thought, because I had already in my past life, quote unquote, thought that was going to be a thing. So I think that is why my brain immediately went to that, because I had already thought about it as a young sprout. But I think that it always was going to be a federal campaign. I think that my drive is towards a federal campaign. I don't think that it ever would have ended up being a mayoral campaign.
Yeah, that makes sense though. I mean, especially given that you said you've always like on a grand scale.
Yeah, I mean,
have you always been very politically minded? Like, did you grow up always kind of interested in this kind of stuff? And
this is a really funny question. Sorry to cut you off. I didn't.
No, you're fine.
This is something I've been thinking about a lot recently. Like I said earlier, I always thought I was Broadway bound. I thought that I was going to be on Broadway in college. I studied theater in college and never really. I always was like, I'm never going to get into politics. And if you talk to my 21-year-old brother right now, he is in the very same mindset. He's like, I don't like talking about politics. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. And I'm like, okay, well, hello, you live with me. We live together. This is my life now. So can you please at least listen? But my family I grew up in a very left family. My mom lives in Marion, Ohio, and it's a very, if they were the only people in the presidential election, they would have voted Trump 10-1. But my mom and my whole family was very, very, very liberal. So it was always something. I remember in the 4th grade, was when I was in the 4th grade. It was the Bush-Gore election, and I came home one day and told my mom that I wanted George Bush to win the election because I liked his last name better. Had no idea, and I think that I probably was grounded. Like, she was like, "No, you can't do that. That person will not help you in the long run. I don't care if he has a better last name. He won't help you in the long run."
Your re-education starts now.
Yeah.
Right? Absolutely. And I will never forget that, because then he won. And my mom was like, "This is because of you." Jokingly, of course. She's like, "This is because of you." So politics has always been something in my life. But it wasn't until 2018, when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was elected into the House of Representatives, that I really understood the importance of ordinary people, working class people in Congress, because it had never happened before. We had never experienced that before. And we saw that this person who was a server was elected into Congress, and that they were making waves in at the time. We can talk about that if we would like, the kind of decline that we've potentially seen in there. But we saw that person was able to make waves for ordinary people. And that's when it kind of hit me that I was like, oh, okay, this is real life. And that's when kind of the activism, the progressivism was leaking from my veins.
Yeah, I would argue that she's probably not even necessarily like a legitimate, like just ordinary person, like a bartender. I mean, she interned for Ted Kennedy.
She did, and she worked on Bernie Sanders' campaign.
Yeah, you don't get that position if you're just some like bartender. That doesn't happen. Like she,
right. Well, I'm hoping we get that position as just a bartender, because that's where I am.
But I think that that's good. Like, as much shit as I give the squad because they're garbage, they did inspire a lot of people to get more involved. I just wish that they would stop sheepdogging those people into a party that's designed to kill them. That would be nice.
Right. And that was something that Chris asked me immediately when we sat down for the Medicare for All stuff. He said, "Why are you running as a Democrat?" And my immediate thought was, because I want to win. Because the establishment of the Democratic Party has been the downfall of my campaign.
Mm-hmm.
So
and that's why I don't think electoral politics, like, I mean, going back to that, I mean, they will always torpedo any actual person who challenges any level of power. Christina Livio in Florida is dealing with that exact same thing. She's running as a Democrat, and she said, well, I'm doing that because in my district, you have to run as a Democrat to even have a chance. And I'm like, sweetie, you still don't have a chance. They're still crushing your campaign. And that's, you know, kind of the problem, is that we can't get ordinary people elected because the establishment is so strong and so pervasive that they will crush any small campaign.
And we can look at,
we saw that with the squad. I think they provide a perfect example of entering the system with the best of intentions, although that's arguable whether they had the best of intentions, and then being subsumed by that corrupt oligarchic system so quickly, basically devoured. And now they're, like Misty said, trying to sheepdog the public into supporting this party that is essentially rump at this point. It's like I said, it's run by oligarchs. It's controlled across the board by oligarchs. And I don't say that people shouldn't try, that it's futile to enter that system and try to change it, but the fight is definitely huge. And
it's a fight too. It's like,
do you think that you would be able to, we've asked other candidates this question. I think we asked Shahid Buttar. I think we asked Steve Cox too. So if you get elected and you go to Congress, are you going to be, because there's a lot of pressure put on you then if you're in that position.
There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure now.
But I mean, they will come for you. They'll say, okay, you don't vote our way on this thing, then we're gonna, we'll run attack ads against you. We'll run somebody against you. There'll be a number of things that they'll threaten you with. Are you going to be able to, and this isn't me being confrontational, by the way. We ask everybody this, like, are you going to be able to withstand that level of pressure and like hold true to who you are? Because I think that would be incredibly tough. I don't know if I could do it.
As you're asking, of course the answer in my heart is, of course, absolutely.
Right.
And the answer is yes. The answer will always be yes, because the job of a representative, and this sounds like a very canned answer, but this is, if this is something I've been battling with all week. And I hope this answers your question in an indirect but direct way. If I lose, because I'm a when person, so when I win, but if I lose, and I lose because my policies, I'm standing for a specific policy, then they're not ready for those policies and we just keep fighting harder. I will not bend for, I mean, the establishment, the word establishment makes me so angry right now. In the past, like, I've been live on my campaign for 2 months, but I've been working on it for a year. But if it can't be done my way and the way it needs to be done for the people I'm representing, which is myself included, then it isn't gonna work. Then it shouldn't work, and it's not going to be able to be for me. Then I am doing something that they're not ready for, and we just have to fight on the outside looking in even harder. So yeah, I would like to say when I get there, absolutely, I will absolutely do those things. I will absolutely stand up to that, because I'm fighting for people's rights. I'm fighting for healthcare. I'm fighting for LGBTQ rights, racial injustice. I don't care about the money that's involved. I don't have any money to care about. I have never had money. My entire family has grown up very poor. I've never had money to motivate me for anything, because if I did, I wouldn't even know what to do with it. So that doesn't, like, I don't care. None of that bothers me. None of that matters to me. I just want people to be able to live their lives. So yes, I think the answer is honestly yes. And I say that with my gut, I think.
So I was looking at your website earlier, and
Isn't it great? Isn't it a great website?
Well, it's very Scandinavian in its neatness, which I appreciate.
Me too. I was like, oh, so I created that with my friend. We did that together just over a year. It took us a year, and it was a labor of love, and also a labor of, like, we did that by ourselves. So
yeah, that's cool.
So looking at the issues page, I'll list all of the issues you have here: LGBTQIA plus rights, racial injustices, Medicare for all, financial inequities, housing and homelessness, immigration, climate crisis, substance utilization, which I'm assuming you're referring to substance abuse.
Can you click on it? If you click on it, it
it's
expands.
legalize and decriminalize marijuana, make Narcan accessible without prescriptions for those experiencing opioid overdoses, create a treatment over punishment plan that uses marijuana taxes to create more opportunities for people with a substance use disorder, and expand funding.
Similar to that law in Oregon that they passed, where that incredible, because the United States, I know we're not going to talk about this, and I just want to point this in here really quick. The United States is a very punishment over treatment country, and why in the world are we dealing with that? Why are we not helping people?
That's our slave labor. That's slave labor.
Right?
We have to fill our prisons, silly.
Correct. And we need a treatment over punishment, because how are people supposed to get better if we're just throwing them in jail?
Right.
Fuck that. Absolutely not.
Yeah. And it seems like such a no-brainer.
And then the last two are family planning and rights, and gun control and reform. And I personally am for advancing all of these issues, but I have to ask about foreign policy and why that doesn't appear under your issues, and what your position is with regard to that.
So we were talking earlier, and as an individual, I'm very open about not knowing, and don't want to make a hard stance on something that I don't have a specific grounding for. I don't know if I know enough about foreign policy to say this is what I believe in and how I want to change it, but that doesn't mean that I'm not learning about it. That is something everyone's asked me this. What are your stances on foreign policy? I said, ask me in about 2 months once I know everything. For a quick example, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, of course, never will stand for oppression, never will. So, but there's a lot of history within that. So you have to know all of that history, I think, to be able to kind of firmly stand on 2 feet and make a statement about this is what I say, this is what I mean. And so just not knowing enough about it is my answer to that.
I think that's fair. And I appreciate the fact that you're honest about it and you just say, listen, I don't know enough to
Right.
put myself out there. Because, you know, for Jesse and I, that's something that we are very, like, really passionate about is foreign policy. And so
Yeah.
obviously, you know, not having foreign policy is a little bit of a red flag for somebody like us.
Okay.
Like, no, it's
Yeah.
not like that, but that's
No,
why
we love a red flag.
yeah, no, I
We
appreciate the fact that you're willing to say, I just don't know enough. And
Yeah.
you're not willing to put out an uneducated
an uneducated and fake response. I
Yeah.
mean, we see all the time. The biggest thing that we can like look into is Tim Ryan. Go to Tim Ryan's website and look for his issues. There are none. There are zero. There's nothing.
AOC is also a case example of that too.
Mhm.
She initially had a peace economy listed as part of her platform,
Mhm.
and that was very quickly and suspiciously erased from her website. And then that was also around the time she gave an interview on PBS and was asked about statements she had made regarding Palestine, and she bumbled her answers and really embarrassingly in a cringeworthy way tried to walk back her previous statements. And now we see that when it comes to foreign policy, she really has no idea what she's talking about. She's supporting the so-called counter-revolution, color revolution in Cuba, then deleting her tweets about it once she realizes she doesn't know what she's talking about.
And doesn't that
and I bring up foreign policy not to point out any deficiencies in your platform, but primarily because I think Misty would agree with me that it is the umbrella under which all of these issues are sort of prisoner, because so much money, I think more money than just about anything this government spends goes to foreign policy, goes to military spending, right? And so when Chuck Schumer a few years ago whined about, well, how are we going to pay for it all with regard to Medicare for all?
Right.
Well,
we just gave the military like another $30 billion.
How about we don't spend $1 trillion a year on a war machine that wants to perpetuate forever wars?
That's funny that you say that, because going back on your AOC thing, wouldn't it be easier to not backtrack and not do all of that if you just kind of state, I don't know everything. We talked about this earlier. It's really hard sometimes to stand on this pedestal and be in this position because people are down your throat about everything. And when I say people, I mean my people. The people who would be voting for me at the ballot are very kind of down your throat about everything. So it's much easier to say, help me learn, than I believe this. Actually, no, I don't, because what I said earlier is not there, because people within politics and within a world of activism and support are so critical. They're so critical. And it's easier to start at nothing and grow into something than to flash a light and it be wrong. And so that is common sense to me. And common sense really is just what we all need to learn. We just need to learn common sense. Something that I talk about a little bit when it comes to family planning is the lack there of paid family leave. And one of the biggest questions that people are like, well, how are you going to pay for it? And I was like, well, look at our military budget. Let's what is the word I'm looking for? Reallocate the funds from that military budget that we don't need into a paid family leave. That's easy. That's a no-brainer to me. So there are more in-depth things. I would absolutely love both of your inputs, because you seem, from listening and watching, like you really know what's going on. So that assistance would be
Yeah, I would
blowing.
love, I mean, I'm sure Jesse would too. We're both of us are very big on foreign policy. A lot of
Yeah,
the stuff that we
please.
do, a lot of the interviews that we do are with people talking about Israel Palestine or talking about
That is the
you
hardest
know,
one. That's the hardest one to even like talk to anyone about,
it's hot
because
button.
hot button and so much information.
Yeah,
But
no, there's a ton. There's a ton. It's really, to me, to me, it's one of the easiest ones because it's such a clear cut. Like there's no question who the bad guy is. There's no
Well,
question
that one I
whatsoever.
know.
Yeah.
That one I'm very like, okay, this is it.
I
Like,
think the reason
understand.
for you it's going to be difficult is because they're going to call you anti-Semitic, and that as a politician will be damaging to some level, no matter what you do to prevent against it. I don't care if people call me anti-Semitic. I don't care. I know I'm not, and so I just don't give a shit. But as a politician running for office, that will definitely be kind of like a a little hurdle that you're going to have to get over. You're going to have to learn how to effectively combat that smear because they will come for you. That's what they do.
And
Constantly learning also is something that people need to be very, very open about doing. Constantly learning the things that are going on. We can get on Twitter right now and see a trending hashtag about Medicare for all, for example. And then tomorrow we're talking about something that's completely different, that is brand new. And somehow I'll never understand. There are people who are experts immediately. I'll never understand it. I'm like, how do you learn so quickly? When do you have the time? I'll never know. But also, people are people too. Like, what? If you know everything, good for you. But also, what? How?
Yeah. No, I don't think anybody knows everything. I think there are a lot of people who know a lot of stuff and they're always amazing to me. Like Whitney Webb, for example, the amount of information she's able to keep in her brain is like amazing to me. But yeah, I think that, I think that it's best to just, like you said, just, I don't know enough about this to have, and be willing to learn and be open to listening to people. What bothers me about the whole AOC situation, that interview that Jesse mentioned, she did the whole, well, I'm not an expert on these things. And I'm like, you have a degree in international relations, sis.
From
like,
Boston University.
Yeah, you don't get to claim that you're not an expert. Okay, maybe you're not an expert, but to try to play dumb that you don't know what's happening. I think that, Jesse said that she doesn't know what's happening as far as foreign policy. I think she does know. I think that she is afraid to take a stance. I think that, it's the establishment thing. She's under a lot of pressure. That's why she turned her back on Palestinians. And now she's looking to work with Israel on green technology for the Green New Deal and all this other stuff. So, I mean, I think that's what I always worry about with, candidates who are running. Are you going to be able to withstand the pressure to bend to Israel? Because they will, I mean, that's a big thing. They will try to force you to bend to Israel.
And it's not just at the congressional level either. If you go back and look at Obama's statements before he became president, he was, I don't know if very is appropriate, but he was pro-Palestinian, you could say. And leading up to the first time he was elected, he very steadily abandoned those positions. And then
Isn't that crazy?
Once he
crazy?
became president, it was, as is the case with every American president, Israel.
It's really not that crazy because
Israel.
if you look at the influence and power that Israel has in this country, that either you will play game or play ball, or they will force you out. They will figure out a way to get you out of there. And that's why, again, I worry about candidates who have the best intentions getting in there, and then they will come for you. Look at what they did to Ilhan Omar. All she did was like quote a song. It's all about the Benjamins, and she's absolutely right.
Her,
and yes, and they still attack her.
her.
Yeah, they still call her anti-Semitic, and that's what they'll do to you. I'm telling you that's what they'll do to you. So you need to learn how to effectively combat that smear because it's coming. It will come for you.
Thank you. You know what's been the best part of this entire campaign? It has been the learning an entirely new world. It has been that for sure. And in the sense of like, this is what you're going to have to do. And this is what people deal with every day. And now you have to deal with it. And figuring out how to deal with it has kind of been, weirdly enough, one of my favorite parts.
Yeah. So also one of your issues too that I want to talk about because it's big in the news right now is the housing crisis and the I know
Let's talk about it.
I know, let's talk about it. So it's obviously a big issue to you. And then, we see, the squad coming in last minute, pretending like they're doing something. Has that been as frustrating for you to watch as it has been for me? Because they're what I find fascinating right now is they can't get their lies straight. Like first, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says, well, we've been working really hard behind the scenes. Or no, I'm sorry, Cori Bush said that. We've been working really hard behind the scenes for months trying to get this figured out. And then Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says, oh, well, this just totally took us off guard. So they can't even get their lies straight. And they want to pretend like they're doing something at the very last minute, holding this, I don't even know what it is, like a slumber party on the steps of the Capitol when nobody's there. Like that's not an effective protest.
Right.
So what is your viewpoint on that? And what do you think about how this is all being handled right now?
So let me preface with, if we are talking about individuals in Congress right now, I do believe that Cori Bush does a very good job of trying to put people over profit. I do think that it's very, with what's going on right now, that's who we have. So I am a fan of Cori Bush. I followed her journey since 2018. But yeah, it's kind of weird. The housing situation in Columbus is absolutely it's terrible. So seeing my opponent, who is the quote queen of housing, leave and not work for the people in housing at all is infuriating. I said earlier that I live in a neighborhood called Milogan, which is primarily Black brown, and old. It's an old neighborhood. It has generations of history, generations of NCAA sports winners. I know nothing about sports, so like, okay. And some Olympians have come from that neighborhood. And the houses that are being built in this opportunity gentrified neighborhood are going for $500,000. So I was walking towards the bus because I do public transit, and I waved to my neighbor and I said, hi, Miss Liz. And Miss Liz lives next door to one of the houses that are being built. And I was like, how do you feel about the house going up? And she like came down from her porch, and I was like, okay, she wants to speak with me. So, and I don't know if she knows I'm running for Congress. If she does, that's because it's been through the grapevine. But I said, how do you feel? And she was like, my house is in litigation because my landlord's trying to sell it to the developers. Okay, that the eviction moratorium we'll get to. Moving people who have been in their homes for 32 years out of a neighborhood to make new homes is bullshit. It's absolutely terrible, and it's ruining the neighbor. It's ruining the Black brown community in this district. And it's quite convenient that my opponent is the leader of the Congressional Black Caucus, but not supporting the people who live here in the neighborhood. You cannot put a $500,000 home in my neighborhood when the street that I actually live on doesn't have a freaking sidewalk. It doesn't make sense, because that is just blatant gentrification. You're just wanting it for the money. And if someone wants something for money, then you should, it's just like, can you tell I'm frustrated with it? Can you tell I'm angry?
But you should be. People, I mean, this it's ridiculous what's happening.
It's
happening across the country.
Ridiculous.
Yes.
It's and I have said a lot recently that Columbus mirrors kind of like the rest of the country. And it does a lot of like showing on a smaller scale what's going on a larger scale. And when they revamped the eviction moratorium, 30 days was absolutely not enough time. Not even a little, like not even at all. 6 months was my minimum. When they said 30 days, I was like, it should be 6 months.
Yeah, it's almost as if they decided, well, how much notice do you have to give your landlord before you move out? Oh, 30 days. Let's just apply that to the eviction moratorium.
And it's okay. Can we just talk about the fact that this whole extending the eviction moratorium isn't helping? People still are going to owe back rent. We need to cancel rent. We need to cancel it. We need to pay for it. Like just pay. We have the fucking money. We just gave like $30 billion to the military industrial complex again. That was already on top of like $728 billion a year. I think we can afford to bail the people out. We bailed out Wall Street. We can bail people out. We can pay their rent so that, listen, because I'm anti capitalist. And so I'm not a
As
fan
you
of
should be.
landlords. I am
As-
not a fan of landlords.
As
Not
you
at all.
shouldn't be.
However, I also understand that if landlords lose their properties, then that hurts everybody. That's going to put
Yeah,
those people in
absolutely.
financial straits. And then that's going to also affect me. I wish we could do away with landlords, but until we get there, I don't want those people to then have everything yanked out from them too. That doesn't make any sense.
I would love to know what that looks like for you. I would love to know, like, the no landlord, what that looks like in your brain, because that's an interesting thought.
Well, I mean, I think you could go multiple different ways. I mean, you could have, kind of like socialized housing, which people get really pissed off about, because my favorite thing is they say, oh, it all looks the same. Go to any like Dominion Homes development. They all look the same.
Go to IKEA.
Yeah.
Most of your stuff probably comes from that anyway. Anyway, keep going.
No, but
sorry.
yeah, I mean, there's just so many ways that you could do it. First of all, we could just try to get so that everybody has a job and can buy a house. And these are all things that we can legitimately do. Like it's choice. This is all choice that we're making to not make sure that people have housing. A lot of people say, well, what about like homeless people or addicts? Give them a house. That's a huge part of the reason why they're struggling, is that they don't have a house. If people have a place to live, and if we then have Medicare for all, it's like all of these things snowball with each other. They're all interconnected.
Absolutely,
Jesse and I talk about this all the time. Everything's connected. Just like we spoke earlier about how the military industrial complex and the money that we spend there totally affects the fact that we can't do domestic things, that isn't even true, because modern monetary theory, money's not real. We can do whatever the fuck we want.
When I found out about modern monetary theory, I was sitting on my kitchen table listening to an NPR thing, and I was like, oh.
Yeah, money's not real. It's a construct of humanity. We made it up. We can totally do all of these things for people. Then you get into the whole, oh, well, people should have to work for it. Why? Work doesn't equal worth. Like you shouldn't have to work to be like worthy of a decent life as a human being.
And piggybacking off of that, I a little bit of personal thing about me. Homes have always been really hard for me. My parents divorced really young. Both of them moved in with my grandparents. So we were like staying with my parents, but staying with my grandparents. So home never felt real. And then living in Columbus, living with roommates, home has never felt real. Until right now, when I live with my 21-year-old brother, who is 9 years younger than me. So like divorced parents, 9 years younger, you didn't really live together. But this is the first place I've ever felt at home. Like, this is my home. So homes are very weird for me, and finding a home somewhere that you can live and have a place is almost virtually impossible for anyone who wasn't blessed financially. You should not have to have a 700 credit score to have a place to live. Because first of all, if you look at my page under financial, abolishing credit scores is a huge thing for me, because it is a racist, classist system. And you shouldn't have to have a certain credit score to make sure that you can stay in a place and have a place to live.
And you really have no control over it. People will say, well, you can make this move or that move to affect it, but it's essentially arbitrary, and it's almost impossible to know what factors go into determining it.
And if you do, then good job. You were blessed somewhere, somehow, with something that was great. But if you aren't, then good luck being an adult. Good luck having a good life.
And we also don't teach our kids how to effectively manage their credit in schools.
Never.
So, you're 18 years old, you're out on your own for the first time. You have no idea what you're doing. You miss, a couple bills, or you're late on a couple bills, and your credit is ruined for years and years and years. And you can't buy a house. You can't buy a car. Sometimes you can't get the job that you want.
You can't get an apartment.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's amazing that it has so much power over your life. This little number that some, turd makes up in an office.
And then we look at who. I'm sorry, you go.
No.
Then we look at the people who do have good credit. Statistically, it's white people. It's white people who are taught by their money hungry people and in their life how to manage their credit, which equals terrible neighborhoods that people just don't put money into because they don't have good credit and aren't able to have the money to do that. So it's also a racist system.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of racism, one of your issues is dealing with racial injustices. So I'd like to ask you, in that vein, what's your stance on police abolition?
Hold on one second. What am I getting for you? Oh, the computer. Great. I don't know. I don't know where I stand on police abolition because it is not something that I can feasibly picture in my head. I do, like it says on my website, really believe in the defund and the reallocation of funding within the police systems. But I don't think I have an answer for that because it's not something that I can feasibly picture in my head because it's something that I've known my whole life.
No, and I think that that's fair because when I was first kind of trying to figure out where I stood on that 2 years ago, that it was like, that's a hard, because
That is hard.
we're raised in a system where there's just always been cops. And so I'm like, well, what does that look like then? Like that's, but I like
Yeah.
highly recommend like really looking into it. And, you know, because there's this is another thing where it's very nuanced. There are a lot of different like levels and ways that we can go about doing it.
Right.
But Jesse did a really good interview with, why am I blanking? Alex
Vitale.
Thank you. Who wrote the book, The End of Policing.
Okay.
And it's a really good interview. You should check that out. It was before I joined the show, but Jesse did a great job. And then that book
Right.
is also really amazing too.
Okay.
But yeah. And,
Yeah, he's a sociology professor at
Mhm.
Brooklyn College. So that said, there are a lot of sociologists across the country who are doing really good work as pertains police abolition. So there's a lot of material to look into there.
yes.
And I understand completely when you say we've known the presence of cops our whole lives. So what would life look like without them? I think that's maybe microcosm isn't the right word, but that's very similar to the absence of electoral politics we were
Mhm.
talking about earlier.
Right.
We've
That
grown
is
up only
interesting.
knowing electoral politics, but just because we've grown up only knowing the presence of these things doesn't mean that the absence of them or the abolition of them
Correct.
is impossible.
Yes.
I don't
And
disagree with you there.
that's
I
one of
absolutely
the
agree with
most
you.
frustrating things for me is that I feel like Americans have kind of like pushed themselves into a corner and they're like, this is just how it is. And this is the best that we can do. And it's not the best that we can do. We have to be willing to look outside the box and we have to be willing to examine other ways of doing things because what we're doing isn't working.
Right.
And so, you know, and that is, I think humans in general are afraid of change. I think change is scary. We like the familiar, but I think that we're well past the point of like needing to move beyond this entirely broken system. It's broken at every level. So, you know, whether it's policing or, you know, the abolition of the military industrial complex or all of those are things that we have to really start pushing into the popular conversation because the more people talk about it, the more comfortable they'll get with at least, you know, examining the idea with at least, you know, being open to the possibility of those things, because right now those aren't things that people talk about. I mean, we've just now started to talk about defunding the police,
Right.
you know?
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I think that we have to start push even further past that. Our friend Awkward, who's a rapper. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
No.
He is a huge activist. He deals with police abolition, prison abolition, all of that stuff. But he's been working for, I mean, years on the 10 demands for justice. And so that might be something you want to look into too, just because he's a wealth of information on these issues as well. So yeah, I think that's but like with the racial justice issue, like what do you feel about reparations? Do you support reparations?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. It was interesting. I was talking to somebody from my hometown who's one of my friends. I was talking to them about reparations and I was kind of like talking about policy. This is pretty early on. I was like, yeah, blah, 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 blah. This is what I do. This is what I'm running for. They're like, okay, you're progressive. We get it. Okay. And then I said reparations and ooh, you lost me. And I was like, how? And so it is something that, but if we look at it, there are two forms of policies that I think progressives run on. They run on the progressive policy, which is Medicare for all, which is a Green New Deal. And then we look at the transition policies, the things that we want until we get that. And if we're giving free public college, if we're giving free healthcare, if we're doing universal jobs, if we're doing a minimum wage that should be more than $15, that is the progressive policy. I believe the reparations are the transition policies until we can get to those things.
So you brought up education, and that's something I want to ask you about too, particularly charter schools, which Chris Hedges, I don't know if you're familiar with him, but I think he very aptly framed them as apartheid schools, because you really do have to be of a certain class and a certain race to be accepted to these schools. And it's different education levels for different people, like I just said, based on race and class and income.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious what your position is on that.
I'm someone who grew up in public school. My whole family went to public school, went to a public university. My nieces are going to public school. I know nothing but a public school. And know nothing. When I say know nothing of a public school, my hometown, I think, opened a charter school this year. So my knowledge on charter schools is like zero, because it's not something that I have ever experienced at all and had any sort of exposure to at all. Jesse coming in with the questions that I don't know the answers to. I love it.
That's all right. He's good at that.
I love it. I like I said earlier, I love not knowing and knowing what I need to learn more about. So thank you for giving me these questions.
Well, I ask because they're, as I'm sure you've seen, proliferating across the country almost on a daily basis, it seems. And there's no evidence that they provide a better education when compared to public education. Right. So what are they all about? Are they necessary? And I think
and it really is like that connection between racial justice and education justice, because like he's right there. It's an incredibly racist system. You have to be of a certain level of privilege to even be accepted. And then you're still not getting any better education. So to me, it seems like it's almost certainly all about money. Which is that's
the system that
the
we
United
live in
States.
Right now.
That should be the motto of the United States. It's all about money.
Which if you
like
translate "in God we trust," it means
it's all about money.
All about money. So like it's pretty much on our dollar bill. So
yes. No, I mean it's okay. So on the substance utilization, because I like that you have this in your platform, because the fact that weed is not legal is fucking ridiculous. It's the year 2021 and we're still pretending like this is, this terrible thing that should not, so how do you feel about the use of psychedelics as far as like therapeutic treatments or even recreational use? Because we've seen a lot of talk about psilocybin being really helpful for depression, anxiety, PTSD, all of those things. But it's really difficult for us to get even funding to look at really study it, because pharmaceutical companies own the government and they don't want us to move away from popping a bunch of pills. So is that something you would be open to exploring more, if we're pushing for the funding to be opened up for those kinds of studies?
I mentioned earlier that Oregon passed a really, really, really progressive bill and are using, it's like the numbers are in my head. 4s or 7s. Dyslexia is real. So that law in Oregon where they passed the use of drugs to a certain extent and using the taxes on those to go to treatment is perfection for a treatment over punishment system approach. Yes, thank you. And going towards that for everyone, for any type of use. I know very little about psychedelics. My family was very involved in a youth drug and alcohol prevention organization. So my whole family kind of was involved in that my entire life. So with that being ingrained in my brain, you learn something and you have to unlearn it. And it wasn't unlearning not using, it was, this is what it does, this is what it will do. But when you said treatment and I was like, oh, that makes sense to me, because like I said earlier, common sense makes the most sense. So in exploring that more and figuring out, I mean, there's going to be like multiple things that in that legislation and like in that law and in that in the fruition of that would be interesting to see what happens. But yeah, exploring that more would be kind of cool. I think that we could
The
do
studies that have
something.
come out so far have been really amazing,
Seem
actually.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
wanna.
they're able to
That's
treat
interesting.
PTSD patients, soldiers who come back from war. It's why can't I say words today?
Psilocybin.
Yeah, thank you. I'm like trying to say psychedelic and psilocybin at the same time.
You guys are a
Psilocybin
good
has
team.
been shown to be really effective on depression, actually, which, as somebody who
Okay.
suffers and has suffered from depression for most of my life,
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
really exciting to me. And like,
That's cool.
it's like micro dosing. You just take a very small amount and it can really have like huge beneficial elements to it. So
Okay.
yeah, I mean, the fact that we can't get the funding to actually do the studies is really frustrating, because these are things that, instead of medicating people with these pharmaceuticals, we could be using more natural. I mean, because it's, mushrooms, they grow from the ground, so it's a more natural option. And I think that's something that we should be willing to look into, and that it shouldn't be such an obstacle to do so.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Well, we don't
go
work
ahead.
in Silicon Valley, so
Yeah,
microdosing isn't
right.
allowed for us.
That's true.
But I wanted to add to
Oh,
that
go ahead.
that internationally there are lots of good examples as well. In
Yeah.
Switzerland, with safe injection sites, in
Mhm.
Portugal, where all drugs have been decriminalized, and especially with the safe injection sites, they've been very beneficial because they allow people who use heroin to have a doctor administer it to them and watch over them in case anything goes wrong. And it actually has been proven to help them reduce their use and build back up a productive, for lack of a better word, life. So some people will go to these injection sites, inject heroin, and then actually go about their days, go to their jobs. And as their productivity increases, as they feel like meaning is coming back to their lives, they use less drugs. And I'm not saying that's across the board, but the statistics on it are very worth noting and of
That's a much better
significance.
approach than just throwing addicts in jail.
Mhm.
Yes, absolutely. The entire time you're saying that, I was like, that is putting people first. That is
Yeah.
putting people first. That is putting people first. Why we're not doing that really blows my mind.
I know a lot of things in this country blow my mind, though.
I'm like,
Okay, go ahead.
No, that was it. That was all.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say, I wanted to ask you before we wrap up. We spoke about this before, and I told you I was going to spring it on you. But you said that this is another thing that you're not super familiar with. But I'm a Julian Assange activist. I'm a free speech activist, a press freedom activist. It's been my focus in life for over 2.5 years now. So where do you? I know that you don't know specifically that much about Julian Assange, but just in terms of free speech and press freedom, where do you stand on that? What do you think about all of the deplatforming that we're seeing, the censorship that we're seeing? What's your position on that?
And in the most simple way, well, okay, actually not in a simple way. The Medicare for All rally was, I don't know what the word is, but it was like flagged on Twitter as harmful. Was that correct?
Mm-hmm.
That is censorship. That is forcing people not to know that we're trying to fight for people's lives. So that is nuts to me. That is nuts that there are people who are able to stop the progression. I don't know if you've noticed, but I use my hands so much. And right now I'm like over here, like, Matt, stay in frame at least. But it's ridiculous. For lack of better terms, it's ridiculous because there are things that we need to be talking about that people are minimizing. And I'm experiencing that firsthand with my election, with my campaign. And it's horrific. It's dumb. It's stupid.
Well, the thing that I think is most dangerous
very
about
simple
it,
terms.
yes, I think the
And
thing that's
dangerous, yes.
it's dangerous because what's happening is we have 5 or 6 companies that control 90% of our media, and they are feeding us their version of reality. We're being propagandized on a daily basis. And then they're
would love
now
my friend
trying to
Emily.
eliminate our ability to effectively combat that propaganda. And so we
Right.
can't even put out legitimate information. Like nothing that Julian Assange exposed was wrong. They've never gotten it wrong. WikiLeaks has a 100% record of accuracy. There's no other media outlet on planet Earth that has got a 100% record of accuracy. They've never gotten it wrong. So there's no reason why that should be illegal for him to release legitimate information as a publisher. So I think it's just really, for me, it's just a really
And the right
dangerous
to
thing.
know.
Yes.
Where's the right
yes.
to know come in? Because we as
Yes.
individuals have the right to know.
We should.
Right.
We
right.
should.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the persecution of Assange sets a huge precedent. It already has for other whistleblowers. And I think it enables people like Jen Psaki to get up and make the statements she made about how if you're spreading information on one platform and are deplatformed there, then it should apply to all your other social media platforms. And in the same statement, I believe it was, or a statement shortly thereafter, or maybe before, don't quote me on the dates, but they were very close together if it wasn't the same statement. She said that the vaccines went through the gold standard testing
Of FDA testing, yeah.
of the FDA, which
is a lie.
Was not true and is not true. They're still experimental vaccines. And there you have it. She's able to get away with talking about punishing misinformation for people like us, spreading misinformation for people like us, as she's spreading misinformation. And
how many times have they been caught lying? I mean, the government is the biggest purveyor of misinformation on planet Earth. I mean, this isn't like, that's not hyperbolic. That off the top of my head, I could ramble off like a couple dozen examples of times that they are like knowingly lied to us.
Yeah.
Weapons of mass destruction, anybody? I mean, it's ridiculous that this is even a thing that they can say with a straight face, that if you get caught posting misinformation, then you should be deplatformed. And like, they removed a sitting president from the internet. Like even Pinterest took down, and I'm no Donald Trump fan. He's a total douche canoe, but he was a sitting president and they wiped his existence off the internet. That's terrifying. That is terrifying that they're able, some like tech bro in Silicon Valley has that level of power to decide who gets free speech and who doesn't.
Just to click it, just to be like, nope.
That's not okay.
Yeah.
There should be due process, and there are already laws for slander and libel and, threatening violence and all of those things. So if somebody breaks a law, take them to court, but you don't get to have some dude in some office in Silicon Valley deciding who gets free speech. That's not something I'm ever going to be comfortable with. It's not okay. So, I mean, that's just to me. And I would, again, you asked me prior to starting taping that you would love some more information.
Please.
I have got you covered. I have got you covered. And this is really just, and like Jesse said, it sets a precedent. And he mentioned that for other whistleblowers, what really is terrifying is this will be the first time that a journalist is charged under the Espionage Act, the first time ever. And that right there should terrify everybody, because that changes the game entirely. That really is like a pivotal shift in humanity. That's like it's like one of those turning point moments where we're going to go down one of two paths. One of them's fascism, and I don't want to go that way.
And this act is from 1917, from during World War I, as Jimmy Dore and Ron Placone recently pointed out very poignantly, I think. And so the fact that this archaic wartime act is being applied now to, as Misty said, a journalist who's never gotten it wrong, who's exposed crimes of state, but has been turned into a criminal. It just begs the question, where the fuck are we? And
I've been asking myself that question quite often.
That's why people might not see the connection, at least immediately, between Assange and these other issues we're talking about, but
it impacts
it's there.
everything.
It's there.
Yeah. Everything you want to fight for, you need press freedom and free speech in order to fight for it effectively, period. End of story. People got mad because Fiorella spoke about Julian Assange at the Medicare for All rally. The whole reason they were in front of the CNN building is because there's a media blackout about Medicare for All and about the March for Medicare for All. And that's exactly what we're talking about with Julian Assange. That's where we're headed. And if he's allowed to be prosecuted, then it literally impacts everything that we're trying to fight for. And it's,
Right.
It's a very telling, speaking about whistleblowers, Barack Obama's getting ready to host this huge birthday party, right? 500 people, all kinds of rich and fancy people are coming. Pearl Jam's going to perform, which breaks my heart. Eddie Vedder is just, ugh. I know he's a neoliberal, but geez Louise, it sucks. But he's having this huge ass party. And then yesterday was Daniel Hale's birthday, and he got to spend that in prison. And he's the guy that exposed Barack Obama's horrific war crimes in the drone program.
I saw that tweet of yours.
Yes. And to me, our society is completely broken, where we have the person who exposed some of the worst war crimes I can imagine, drone murder of innocent civilians, is sitting in prison, while the guy who committed those crimes is getting ready to host like a giant ass birthday party at his 32-acre estate on Martha's Vineyard. And we're really backwards. We have things really entirely backwards. But I would love to send you more information on Julian Assange.
Please.
I will definitely do
love
that.
It.
Obviously it's that's my thing, so I could ramble on about it forever.
Great.
But I know that you probably want to get home. You've been at work. I appreciate you sitting in a closet to talk to us. That was really nice of you.
This has been my favorite interview I think I've ever done.
Oh, good. We get that a lot, actually, and I love it every time.
Can you still hear me? This AirPod died.
No. I can still hear you. You're good.
Okay,
but
great.
Yeah, we'll wrap it up though. So just once again, tell everybody where they can find your website, where they can find you on Twitter, how they can help your campaign, all that good stuff.
Awesome. Well, first of all, thank you both so very much for having me. Like I said a million times, I love being asked hard questions that I don't know the answer to, because it is golden to be able to feel like I'm learning something. So thank you for giving me the opportunity, and thank you for sending me the information, even though you haven't yet. But you can find me at Matthew Meade OH, MATTHEW MEADEOH, as in the abbreviation for Ohio. .com, and then Matthew Meade OH on every platform. If you want to donate to my platform, it's actblue.com/Matthew Meade OH. Platform, donate to my campaign, that's what I meant to say. And I am running for Ohio's 3rd Congressional District, challenging a very established Democrat, and that's my story. That's my life.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good luck to you on your campaign. Hopefully you're able to break through the media blackout. Good luck, man. Really.
Now that Nina Turner's campaign is over, I'm thinking it ends tomorrow. I'm thinking that maybe it's going to be a little bit more of a push. I'm hoping.
I wish you luck with that, because
thank you.
Nina Turner does suck a lot of the air out of the room in Ohio. So
and if you probably have the same Twitter account as I do, and it is just, that's all I see. That's all I'm seeing.
Yeah, pretty much. Okay, so Matthew, thank you so much for joining us again. We
Thank
appreciate you taking the time, especially being at work. I'm sure that wasn't
totally fine. Totally fine.
Okay, so thanks everybody for watching, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you guys. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.